good evening, everyone. My name is Sally, and I'm the Program Director for Smart Families, and I'm going to be walking us through this webinar this evening. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. I think if your school has not already started back, you are imminently about to start, and so we really appreciate you taking some time this evening to learn a bit more about Smart Families and what we're going to be doing at your school. Just a few housekeeping things. You are welcome to have your camera on. You're welcome to have your camera off. We never mind any kind of distractions or disturbances. Busy evenings. Sometimes it's bedtime, dinner time, and things may, kind of disrupt the flow, and it's absolutely fine. We love families, and we are just so aware that these things happen, and so it's fine. And half the time this also happens to me as well, so welcome. We do have your email addresses for us to be able to send out a certificate for attendance this evening. So we are able to provide 1 hour professional development, which you can have for your teacher files, which we are going to email out afterwards. And also we will make the slides available to you as well. And then finally, if you have seen me in your school already, because I have been at many schools over the last 10 days, I want to just clarify that you don't need to sit through this again, because I know we sent an email out saying that this teacher training was on, but if you have seen me in person, then you don't have to do a repeat one of these. So you are off the hook and get a free pass to leave this evening. And then, go ahead, Hillary.
I'm Hillary from Smart Families. I'm so sorry. Just want to make sure I do a lot of the work on the back end as well in regards to certificates and marketing and the event registration. And in order for us to ensure that you get your certificate for the training today, I see some people were actually invited to attend. We want to make sure that you actually RSVP'd on our website. And so when you RSVP, you submit your name and your email address. And that is how our website will have your information on file for us to be able to send you your certificate. So it would be a shame if someone attended and then couldn't get their time for being here this evening. That link I will put in the chat box just to ensure that you know where to go if you did not actually RSVP directly. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Hillary. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm just going to kind of give a little brief introduction before I start the presentation. I always start by saying this is absolutely not a Texas accent. I originally am from England. I have called Texas my home now for 10 years. And prior to my role with Smart Families, I was also a teacher in the classroom for 16 years, teaching most recently at a private school here in Houston. And so I was there for 6 years before I transitioned out of my role. And so the reason I transitioned and became affiliated with Smart Families was because from an education standpoint, I had really started to notice some interesting shifts in my classroom. So I had seen some shifts in children's abilities to emotionally regulate, and I may talk through some of these and you may recognize them yourselves. So emotional regulation. I had noticed some changes in children's abilities to pay attention and focus for prolonged periods of time, and also just some behavior issues. And all these things were going on pre-COVID. However, I think COVID was actually a beautiful storm that just made it really very apparent to us that something was going on. And so I've been seeing this in my classroom. And then alongside this, I had also started to notice some shifts in the parents of these students. So the parents were feeling more helpless, more powerless, and they were desperately trying to connect with their children, but the children had almost been, hijacked by what was becoming more obvious to be technology. And we just had this really true disconnect. And I think a catalyst for me when I was like, gosh, there is a shift happening, was when I had a parent come to me and ask me whether I would tell the child something because they listened to me and not their parent. And so that shift in authority, again, was just really curious. And I started to do some research in what it was that was occurring with students and occurring with families, especially the dynamics at home. And I really landed on this interaction between technology and child development. And if any of you are familiar with Dr. Crystal Collier, she is on our advisory board. She is a Houston-based researcher, neuroscientist, therapist. She has her own therapy office, and she sees lots and lots of adolescents. She actually came to my school and she did my in-service training. And I realized she was the person I needed to speak to. And what she provided me was kind of a neuroscience education about why I was seeing the things in my classroom. And it was really very fascinating. And so from there, we collaborated, we helped build an elementary curriculum together. And now, as I say, she serves on our advisory board. And what we do is we use neuroscience to really emphasize what is happening with children and technology. On a personal note, I am the mum to 3 children. So my eldest is about to start high school, which is a huge, big parenting season transition for me. I also have, so that's my son, and then I have a 7th grade son, and I have a 4th grade daughter. And so I am somebody who comes into the schools and I do a lot of the parent presentations. And I often say to these students, there is nothing you can say to me that I do not hear in my own home. I know how hard it is to be a parent in this digital age and the peer pressure that these parents feel. And I also know the pressure that the children feel, you know, in a world where they want to socially conform to the things that their friends have got, you know, the apps that their friends are using. It can be really hard to navigate through this. And so this presentation this evening is going to kind of frame what our program is about. And I want to reassure you as teachers on this call, this really, the purpose for this is just to inform you what's going to be happening on campus. We are very mindful of your schedule, of your you are about to receive all these students back, you know, you've been doing all this training. And so this is really just to inform you what it is that we're going to be doing on campus. And I'll kind of got to go through bit by bit. So I'm going to share my screen. I believe Hillary's going to stay in the call. And so please, you are more than welcome to use the chat. And I just saw, Linda, you mentioned about how do we know where we are as speed. So I think you would have had a confirmation through. If you're not sure, I would just encourage you to maybe sign again. And then you can, if you get 2 certificates, you get 2. And if there's any issue at all with certificates, I'll actually leave my email address in the chat at the end, and you can just send me a quick email and I can send the certificates back as well. Please use the chat facility to ask any questions. I do not mind interruptions. You know, I love interaction. And if you want to start by maybe just putting what school you are from, that would be wonderful. And we can just kind of get a grasp where we are. Our program is in, I believe, 47 schools now. I have seen many schools over the last 10 days, but we now have schools up in Chicago. We're going to be in Dallas, in Austin. And so we are so excited that we are able to reach so many people. And again, we just really appreciate that you are here this evening walking through our presentation. So welcome, everybody. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hillary, or anybody, would somebody just shout and let me know if you can see my screen before I start? I'm happy if anybody just says, yeah, you can see. It should say program introduction.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to move to this next slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little about the history and the mission of Smart Families, and then I'm going to go through a few slides of the neuroscience. And this is the neuroscience that parents receive. This is the neuroscience that students receive. We are really very intentional at providing very consistent information across every component of a school community. We really believe that our program is most impactful when we are all given the same information. And so I'm going to go through some of that neuroscience. And then I'm going to specifically look at social media and look at the impacts of that, especially on adolescent brain development. And then I'm just going to close with some information about our program and some key events. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for any questions or anything you want to run by me or any comments. Okay, so the history of Smart Families. On the screen, you'll see this is Brian and Jennifer Kuzma, and they are our founders. A few years ago, their eldest son, and they have 2 children. They have 3 children, but 2 attend St. Vincent de Paul here in Houston. Their eldest son came home and had requested to get a smartphone. And when they kind of investigated about why is it he wanted a smartphone, he kind of let them know that, everybody had a smartphone. And so he had to have a smartphone. And Brian and Jennifer weren't quite at the stage that they wanted to give their child a smartphone. And so they began to ask around a few of their friends and a few people at school. And really what was quite remarkable was they discovered that who generally think are the minority group. So the people who think that they are probably in the minority with not wanting their child to have a smartphone were actually the majority. And the more they asked around, the more they found that actually people felt almost peer pressured as parents or compelled to buy their child a smartphone because everybody else was doing it, or so they were being led to believe from the children. And so Brian and Jennifer did a pilot of Smart Families, and what initially started as a pledge now has grown into Smart Families. But they initially asked people from their school to pledge to delay smartphones until high school, and they were just met with an absolutely incredible amount of affirmation. And I believe somewhere in the 60% region of the school pledged to delay smartphones. So you can see just an incredible amount of parents who hadn't ever been given the platform to say, actually, we don't want to do what, popular culture is telling us we need to do. And they were able to band these families together and really create a stronghold community. So following the success of this, they were able to go and speak to the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, and we were given the blessing from Dr. Haney, who was the superintendent then, to roll this out across Houston. And so we were in 18 schools last year. And as I say, I think we're around 47 schools this school year and growing. We have had so much interest from many, many schools. And we had to stop onboarding at a certain point a few weeks ago just because of the volume of schools that we were dealing with. So that's a little bit about why we were set up and who we are. So our mission. So I'm just going to read part of this and expand a little bit. So Smart Families is dedicated to empowering families to create communities that engage with technology in a healthy, intentional way that is respectful of our innate human dignity. I want to pause here. This mission is spearheaded by the parents. So anybody who's thinking, oh my gosh, another thing that we have to do in school, I want to just give you some reassurance that there is so much power in parents mentoring other parents. It isn't, the teachers who are saying this is what needs to happen, or administration, or for some of you, this British teacher that keeps turning up and saying all of these things. This is parents supporting other parents. And, when another parent stands up and, declares to the friendship group or, we do not want to do what, culture is telling us to do, then it has this amazing ripple effect. And the tipping point, it really happens quite quickly. Sometimes it takes us a little bit of time to build up a bit of momentum, but then when we kind of hit that tipping point, it's really very incredible at the kind of traction that our mission starts to get. So this is parents. Just to touch on the way that we do this is that we ask schools to identify some lead parents. And the lead parent is somebody who's going to work with a Smart Families implementation coordinator to really coordinate, scheduling, events, ways that Smart Families can help support the school. And so, again, you are such an incredible, an integral vessel of information, between your parents and between the students. And this year, we just wanted to be very intentional at, being very transparent and sharing with the teachers, this is the content that your students are going to be receiving, and this is the content the parents are going to be receiving. And I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. So again, this is parent driven with the support from Smart Families. So what we really focus on at Smart Families with a lot of the content that we distribute is these community norms. And these are norms that we hold at the core of our program, but they may not be norms that people are necessarily fully achieving yet. So these might be kind of goals that people are working towards. So they are: prioritize your family and your values, delay smartphones until high school, delay social media until 16, and no phones used in schools. And I'm going to go kind of through step by step. So prioritize your family and your values. So this was something that I was recognizing in my classroom was a little bit of a challenge for some of my families. This is where I saw the biggest disconnect. You would have these parents who, like I say, were desperately trying to connect with their child, but the child was kind of getting sucked more and more into this digital landscape, and the parents just didn't know how to reset this balance. Now, on the subject of balance, we are very intentional with our language at Smart Families. We are not anti-technology by any means, and we never ever use any language that's going to, shame or blame or criticize anybody's parenting. However, we really believe that family comes first, and ultimately what we want to do through the other norms is just reestablish this connection between the parents and children, and really for children to know that they are the safe space, and the parents, the people that they go to, not these influencers on YouTube, or these people that they follow on Instagram. First and foremost, it's parents and family. So that's what we talk about. We also share about delaying smartphones until high school. Now, what's been really amazing to watch over the last few months is that there has been a lot of media coverage about smartphones, and it's very exciting for our program. We feel like this is just such a great time and opportunity to be rolling out Smart Families within a school, because people know how addictive these smartphones are. And it might, we've had some people say, well, it's not the smartphone, it's the apps. But, the smartphone is this gateway into so many high-risk behaviors and being exposed to so many inappropriate things. And shortly, I'm going to walk through some of the neuroscience to really understand why we know that delay is really the way. Also, delay social media until 16. Again, this has been getting a lot of mainstream media coverage over the last few months. The Surgeon General released a document really delving into social media and proposing that we really need a warning label on social media, similar to how alcohol has got warning labels, and medications and drugs can have warning labels. And the science is so compelling that he really felt that social media also needs to have a warning label. If anybody is familiar with Jonathan Haidt, he released a book called The Anxious Generation a few months ago, and he also focused heavily on this component and this part of our community norms, and talking about mental health, what's going on with children, how we've just lost this balance. And so again, there's a lot of support for delaying social media until 16. And also, I want to say, until 16, that might, it could be somebody's minimum, but a family may have, until 18. So we just felt kind of aligned with what was being talked about and the research that's out there currently, that these were our kind of proposed ages, but we absolutely support anybody delaying further as well. And finally, no phones used in schools. We have been coordinating with admin at schools. We've been talking to lots of different organizations, and we are so excited to see such a big kind of movement when it comes to phones used in schools. Schools have been changing their policies. Schools have been creating all of these different opportunities, whether it's, Yonder bags, or, now children have them switched off, and all the things, because the evidence, again, is just so compelling that having these devices in schools is not good for students' focus, attention, the distraction. Now it's hard to identify which children are feeling lonely or isolated, especially if, they do have these phones. So there are 4 norms. Again, you may be on the way to achieving these. These may not be ones that families say, yes, we're definitely hitting all of these dead on. It might be something that people are going to work towards. And that's where we come in. We want to help support and make these just very, very integral and embedded into school communities. So any of your experiences, now just to be mindful of time, if you have any thoughts about community norms, you can put them in the chat and I can come back to them at the end of the presentation. But again, if you have any thoughts or experiences around these things, please let us know and share. Okay, so The next few slides are going to go through some neuroscience. And if anybody is familiar with Dr. Collier and you've seen her in person present, she does a really great deep dive into a lot of this neuroscience. She's on our advisory board, and she is one of our key speakers who launches our program in schools. But we can also use Dr. Collier for other presentations, and I'll talk about how our program can be tailored a little bit later on. But this is a little bit of Brain Science 101. So some parents can, maybe be a little bit resistant initially to some of the community norms. But when we really explain and teach the neuroscience, really nobody argues with us. The neuroscience is so revealing, especially we focus a lot on adolescent brain development, but really very fascinating about how technology really is impacting brain development. I'm just going to pause and say, when we do our kind of content for parents, we recognize that we have three very distinct demographics of families when it comes to being in a school. So we typically have our lower elementary students. Now, those parents, smartphones might not even be on their radar. They're not thinking about social media. However, what sometimes can happen is, they may not have a smartphone, but there's a high chance now in this kind of current day and age that they probably have an iPad or a device at home. Sometimes parents will hand their own phones off to children, at the dinner table. You don't have to go far now. You can see children in shopping carts staring at screens. So they do have some access to a smartphone. And so we really want to, bring and loop those in. Then we have 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And these are typically our most interactive parents. These are the parents who are hearing the question, can I have a smartphone? Typically, this is when, as children are going to be leaving elementary into middle school, society tells that these children are responsible enough for smartphones, they're independent enough, they're allowed to have this privacy. But again, I'm going to address that through the neuroscience and just say, are they really ready for a smartphone? And I think you'll probably see in a few minutes' time that parents will question actually whether it is appropriate for their child to have a smartphone in this kind of period of time. And then we have middle school parents. Now, we are very realistic and we are very aware that middle school parents currently have probably given their child a smartphone. More often than not, this is the bulk of middle school parents. And we do absolutely need parents who have themselves decided to delay. And our hope is that in a few years' time, as these kind of lower elementary children come up to middle school, that we'll see a total shift in this dynamic. And the expectation will be that, no, you don't give a child a smartphone. There are so many alternatives to smartphones now. If anyone's familiar with dumb phones like Bark Phone, TrueMe, we really want to focus on these internet-enabled devices like smartphones. And, parents will, again, if they're ever a little bit resistant to us, what we tend to find is that it isn't necessarily that we are, using vocabulary that is there to shame or criticize. But honestly, a few parents can actually hear the science and think, gosh, what has happened, or, what has my child gone through with a smartphone? And it's almost that little self-criticism or self-blame, and then it kind of gets projected. And so for those parents, we want to help them as much as we can, understand the neuroscience. We are big supporters of, alternatives to smartphones. There are dumb phones that children can transition onto instead. So just sharing there, we're very realistic about the kinds of groups of parents who we interact with. And there's a lot of value in, these parents of children who did have a smartphone earlier, mentoring those parents who, maybe are considering whether their child should have a smartphone. Because, I've never come across a parent who has ever said to me, I am so glad I gave my child a smartphone when I did. Or, I would have given it them earlier. We often in our conversations with parents hear the opposite. So the neuroscience. So 2 parts of the brain I'm going to focus on are this limbic system, which you can see is behind the red circle. This is sometimes called the emotional brain. And then the other part of the brain is this frontal lobe, or prefrontal cortex. And here it's quite kind of labeled the mini manager. And this is found above the eyebrows, towards the top of the forehead. And it's really fascinating at the way these two parts of the brain develop, and we're going to look specifically at those two. When I was training to be a teacher, I decided to focus on early years because how children learn in the earliest years of their life was just so fascinating for me. And if any of you on here are early years teachers, you will probably relate to, just the total awe and wonder of seeing these children, just mastering these skills so proficiently and so quickly. So the brain develops from the bottom up, and it also develops from the back to the front. If anybody's interested to learn more about the early brain development, there is a man called Dr. Dan Siegel. He has released, it's a few years old now, a book called The Whole Brain Child. And he really talks about, this kind of brain development and what that looks like. And it's a really, really great book. And I had done it as a book study as part of my school when I was in school. But on the screen, you will see, here is some imaging of a little brain cell called a neuron. And you'll see kind of as the child gets older, you will see not only do these brain cells increase, these neurons, but also the connections between them. And these connections are called dendrites, and they kind of look a bit like tree branches. And you want to see lots and lots of dendrites. If you see lots of dendrites, it means there is lots of learning and lots of connections being made. And so on the screen here, this is a child who has been practicing a skill. And so by 2 years old, they are showing some instances of mastering this skill because you can see lots and lots of these dendrites. So this is early brain development. Now, many, many years ago, scientists believed that what a child experienced between the ages of birth and 3 was going to hardwire the brain development of the child for the rest of their lives. So what this meant, for example, is if a child between birth and 3 experienced some kind of trauma, then it was going to be hardwired into their brain, and then the child would potentially encounter difficulties and issues because of this trauma. However, more recently, there was some studies done and research, and UNICEF were part of this big body of research, and they actually discovered that between the ages of 9 and 14, children actually went through another period of rapid brain development. And so this has become known as the second window of opportunity. And during this window is when a child's brain goes through the most incredible reconfiguration and restructuring that's very unique to this period of time in a child's brain. Now, why this is relevant is because between the ages of 9 and 14 is typically when, historically, you would expect that a child would say, like, I want a smartphone, and typically a parent would give a child a smartphone. But this window is so critical, and it's really important that parents are able to provide, experiences and activities in this period of time that are going to create all these connections and these dendrites to set the child up for success for the rest of their lives. However, what we typically see now is those activities that most parents want their child to do, like going outside and riding your bike or, reading a book. Children, because some of I'm going to talk about in a few slides, technology is conditioning their brains, especially these apps and the way that they're using these devices to almost render any of the real world experiences as boring. And, they don't want to go and ride their bikes, and they don't want to read a book. And that's because of the content and the ways that the content is being created to hijack dopamine, and we'll come back to dopamine. So it can be a really challenging time as a parent, because in this window, you desperately want to, provide all of these opportunities, but we are up against huge tech companies who do not want children to live in the, real world. They are doing everything that they can to get these children living in the digital world. And, the future of which is this metaverse, which is what a lot of the tech developers are pushing us towards now, which is where people will live exclusively in this digital world. So this is the second window of opportunity, and I'll keep referencing this as we move on. So from this research, the scientists discovered that the adolescent brain is totally unique. So we can't say it's an older child brain, and we can't say it's a younger adult brain. An adolescent brain is going under very unique reconfiguration and reconstruction. Now, I see this a lot with my own boys. And, you know, I can see that they are in, I mean, I am in this window of second window of opportunity. If any middle school teachers are, you know, you are in this kind of period of time too. And sometimes I have to just stop and remember that this is sometimes why I see the behaviors that I do with my teenage boys. Okay, so back to these two distinct systems that I'm going to talk about. So the first one is this limbic system. Now, the limbic system, sometimes known as the emotional brain, this is the part of the brain that is fully developed around 5th, 6th grade. This is the part of the brain that Dr. Collier refers to as the gas pedal, kind of like the accelerator. What this means is if it looks good, feels good, smells good, tastes good, you can see somebody else doing it over there and that kind of looks good, the limbic system, because it's kind of fully developed in like adolescence, will say, do it, just do it. And this is the part of the brain that is developed to really seek novel, high reward experiences. Now, why this is important is because this other part of the brain, this is the prefrontal cortex. On the picture before, it was this mini manager. Now, the prefrontal cortex, this is what Doctor refers to as the brake pedal. This part of the brain is the part that says, like, stop, hang on a minute. Am I going to get in trouble? Are they going to get in trouble? You know, am I going to get hurt? Are they going to get hurt? All of these consequential, you know, instances. Now, this part of the brain, and if people may know this already, this part of the brain is not fully developed until about 25 years of age. And so can you see we've got this huge period of time of brain development that children go through. Now, why I love to talk about the brain with students, and, you know, we integrated this into my own family too, is that children love learning about brain. And they often kind of know where it is and they can kind of pinpoint it's here, and they might have a few things to say. Maybe they've learned a few parts and all the names for the parts of the brain. But this is such a simple thing that you can translate down just to everyday life. You know, I had some teacher friends challenge me and say, you know, is this not a bit complex? I said, no. If I'm teaching alliteration and onomatopoeia to kindergartners, we are absolutely going to grasp limbic system. And so kind of just to demonstrate that, you know, there are times that my boys will do things and I'll be like, whoa, 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 you've gone limbic. And they're like, oh, hang on, this is that thing that my mum talks about. You know, this is my brain is currently chasing a high reward experience. And what I do is I remind them and say, you know, you don't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex yet. And until you do, I'm going to be the other part of your prefrontal cortex, which means I'm probably going to make some decisions that you do not like, but it's because I know how to keep you safe. And I was sharing some of the in-person trainings I've done this last few weeks. I actually had an amazing parenting win a few weeks ago. So my two boys are just absolutely typical brothers. They are just very typical brothers. And I was out for dinner and I was talking to my husband. And actually what happened was my middle son picked up his drink of water and I kind of clocked it in the corner of my eye. And I saw him moving his water over to his brother's dinner. And so I'm like, he's going to tip the water in his brother's dinner. And then he stopped. And I just turned around to say, like, Jude, please don't. And then he stopped, he put his drink down, he looked me dead in the eye, and he said, I've just used my prefrontal cortex. I was like, yes, you have. And it was just this brilliant moment. And it was the first time he has ever used the language that he hears me talking about. But they just get it and they understand. And so I was able to say, son, you have just demonstrated impulse control. You know, that is a really important skill. Like, I'm so glad I got to witness this and that you were able to share that with me. And so just a really nice, easy way that you can kind of talk about behaviors and, you know, the things that you see. Okay, moving on. So within this prefrontal cortex is where we find these executive function skills. And these executive function skills, so we are not born with them, but we're born with the capacity to develop and grow them. And the way that children do this is by, one, seeing them modeled, and then two, being able to have the opportunity to practice and build these skills. Now, executive function was one of those words that I was hearing a lot about when I was in my own classroom. And actually, around Houston now have popped up these executive function coaching establishments. So not only are parents able to take their children to academic coaching, but actually these children can now go for executive function coaching, where they kind of identify where the deficit is, and then they can help these children learn skills that are going to grow these executive function skills. So on the screen, you'll see we have two kind of groupings. So the first one is birth through middle, things like organization, working memory. Now, these are the skills that a child will need to be able to do something like remember their homework before they go to school. And then middle through age 25, we've got this second kind of grouping of executive function skills, things like problem solving, judgment, emotional regulation. Now, these are the skills that a child will need to be growing and proficient in order to leave home and be a functional member of society. But what research is showing us is that because of this over-reliance and early exposure to technology and the way that children are interacting with it, we're seeing something called arrested development. And these skills are not happening at the time when we would anticipate seeing them. So, this is where you might see middle school children or high school children, who are still mastering skills, or even like showing a deficit in these skills that you would expect to see kind of during elementary school. And again, within my own classroom, this was something I was starting to see these deficits and noticing it was these skills that children weren't able to be, practicing and learning. Here is just a brain imaging scan to show you that scientists have studied this, and they have determined that it is in the prefrontal cortex that we find these executive function skills. And these are still growing all the way through until about 25 years old. So what then we realize is that we have this developmental mismatch. And what I always like to share with people is it's really very apparent through just this simple knowledge of when children's brains develop, and the fact that these children's brains are, hardwired at adolescence to seek out these novel high reward experiences, just how vulnerable the children are when it comes to some of these apps, these very addictive apps, and all of the things that these apps embed inside them to make these children continually seek them out. Another principle that's very relevant here is the use it or lose it principle. And this describes how the brain connections that are used repeatedly get strengthened and kind of grow those dendrites. But what the brain does, and this is, not just during adolescence, it happens kind of lifelong, but it really happens very uniquely at this rate of acceleration during adolescence, is that those connections that are not used or practiced, the brain becomes very specialized and simply prunes them away. And so this is use it or lose it. Here's what this can look like. If a child goes home from school and they are spending 4 hours on Fortnite, can you guess which of those connections are getting strengthened in that child's brain? They are building strong connections for Fortnite. Again, this is a challenge for parents because, no child is probably ever going to get asked at a college interview, how proficient are you at Fortnite? It's just not a question anybody's going to ask these children. And so it's helping guide and kind of point them towards the activities that are really going to help grow the good, strong connections of these healthy skills. So this is use it or lose it. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit now about dopamine. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter that naturally occurs in the brain. And many people will often say, oh, this is reward. This is, the pleasure chemical. And it is, however, it also has a few other different functions. So here at the bottom of the screen, you'll say it regulates motivation. It tells the brain, this feels good, I want more. And it does establish these reward pathways. Now, the way to kind of relate to the motivation part of dopamine is, and this is a little self-story that I'm going to share, I can come home from work and sit on the sofa and decide that I'm going to spend 10 minutes, looking through videos on social media. And then 10 minutes becomes 20 minutes, becomes 40 minutes. And then before I know it, I've lost an hour. I have 3 starving children who are like, Mom, because I haven't made dinner. Now, I don't walk away from that experience feeling like good or like pleasurable. It is motivation that has kept me locked in this screen. And that's dopamine. Now, the gentleman you can see on your screen, this is a man called Ramsey Brown, and he was a neuroscientist who spent many years of his career studying dopamine and also studying specifically dopamine in adolescent brains. And organizations such as his was called Dopamine Labs, they would study the effects of components of technology on these children. So, whether it's heart rate monitors, oxygen monitors, studying functional MRIs to see how children's brains respond to some of the new things that they were creating. And then what he did was he took all of this information that he had learned about dopamine and how it can be manipulated, and he sold it to the tech developers. So he sold it to Silicon Valley, these people who are creating these apps, so that he could inform them exactly the ways to make people more addicted to the apps that they are using. And he publicly made a statement to say, we are not just designing software anymore, we are designing minds. This was very intentional. They knew exactly what they were doing when they were creating these kind of organizations. Now, I believe Ramsey Brown, he had to rename Dopamine Labs a few times. It got bought out a few times. And the last I heard, he was currently working in the world of AI. And so I don't know how that is working out, but that is where he is now. But again, he's not unique in this. There are many, many people who also study and do this too. Okay, so that's the neuroscience part of dopamine. Oh, and I forgot to mention that adolescent brains, they are not only more sensitive to dopamine, but they actually produce more dopamine than adult brains, which means they actually experience the world in a different way during this second window of opportunity and adolescence period. So again, just something to keep in your mind before I move on to the next slide. So B.F. Skinner, and this is a psychology kind of viewpoint now. B.F. Skinner was a famous psychologist who studied behavior and how we could change behavior. So he is famous for his Skinner box, which you can see on the screen. And this is where he would study something called operant conditioning. So this is the kind of behavior conditioning, behavior modification, specifically around consequence and reward. Now, the alternative kind of behavior conditioning, if any are familiar with like Pavlov dog, that's kind of one. But he was looking specifically at consequences and reward. So here, the little mouse would press a lever, the lever would give some food, and the mouse would come to associate this action with being giving a reward. But what he actually discovered was that if they were rewarding the mouse when it wasn't anticipating a reward, or it was expecting something to happen and it didn't happen, that they were able to maximize behavior modification and behavior manipulation. And so this is what he studied. And from the neuroscience and everything they know about dopamine, and from the psychology and knowing that variable reward is the most effective way to reward behaviors, they created these platforms. Now I'm going to share with you just some examples of how these apps are kind of manipulated and created to make addictive users. And this is a little bit of what the students received during the App Trap presentation. So, for example, Instagram. So Instagram shows you what it wants you to see and when it wants you to see it. So you don't see anything in Instagram, probably not in any of the social media platforms. They decide through their algorithms what you see. But this is what variable reward will look like within Instagram. So say there is a person who uploads a picture into Instagram and they, really like this picture, and they are already anticipating that somebody might like this picture. Maybe think, this is a really great picture, or I look really cute in the picture. And so their dopamine will start to increase as they are anticipating a reward, anticipating these likes. But what actually happens is Instagram don't want you to see the likes in real time. So they're going to withhold these likes. Okay, what does this do? Well, what this does is now, in anticipating a reward that you don't get, you start to go into a dopamine deficit. You start to feel disappointment. You start questioning, why is nobody liked this picture? Like, nobody's even commented on this picture. But what's happened is Instagram have kept hold of these likes, because next time you go in, it's going to give you a huge big dump of these likes all in one go, so that your dopamine is going to rise far higher than it would have done if you'd have seen them in real time. And that's the kind of dopamine manipulation that these apps use. Now, put yourself in the position that maybe you're a young teenage girl and you are experiencing an app in this way. And, this is why children can really start to, be led to believe that their value is from the number of likes. They are made to feel disappointment when they don't see the likes that they're expecting. So this is variable reward. This is an Instagram. Now, things like TikTok. TikTok use something called negativity bias. This is the concept of, if it is enraging, it's engaging. And so this is why, if you are driving down the highway and you see a car wreck, you are far more likely to stare and kind of drive slowly past a car wreck than you are if you were stood at the traffic lights and somebody was trying to sell you something. You just wouldn't, our curious brains, because of negativity bias, are not going to look at something that isn't kind of shocking or scary or intriguing. Now, TikTok use this to create their algorithms, and they will push content at children that are going to keep these children's eyes locked into these apps. These apps are free, and the reason why they're free is because these apps make their money from how long somebody's looking at the screen. So TikTok, YouTube are going to push content that is often highly inappropriate for students and for children to see. Here's the predicament, though, because what can happen as a result is, and I hear this, students have shared this with me in the past, that they can end up seeing a video that they probably think, oh, this is one of those videos I think I shouldn't have seen. This is one of these inappropriate videos. But because the child didn't search for the video and they think they're going to get in trouble because they did search for the video, they often will not share with a parent through fear of, repercussion and, being shouted at or being told off for seeing this kind of content. And I've had children share this with me. And it's really important for children to know that an algorithm is set to push this content, and for a parent to know an algorithm is set to push this content. And there may be instances where your child is going to come and see something and they did not search for it. It just is there because of this negativity bias. So this is TikTok. Not only that, TikTok are using the camera on your phone to study facial expressions. And so this technology is looking for shocked facial expressions. Again, if it's enraging, it's engaging. You have to be looking at the screen for 6 seconds for whatever is on the screen to make money. And so it will study facial expressions and micro expressions to see which things are making you look more. An algorithm is counting how long your eyes are staring at a screen, the types of videos that you are watching, and it is building this digital picture of what it thinks it should send you. But these algorithms are so concerning. This is an algorithm can take a child searching for, healthy recipes, and that can become, calorie deficit meals, and then that can become, and so on and so on. And so it will push negative content at them because it's going to keep them looking at the screen for longer. Another thing with Instagram, with their algorithms, so for young girls, algorithms are set to push beauty products and body image content. And they are conditioned and primed to just compare themselves from such a young age. There is something called Snapchat dysmorphia. These are girls have been using, and boys, but girls are particularly vulnerable when it comes to social media. They become so disconnected from who they are because they use so many filters on their faces that they actually, will state how much they dislike being themselves because they don't look like the Snapchat filters. And there are plastic surgeons, across the whole nation who are reporting that women are going, young women are going in to ask for, cosmetic surgery to look like themselves in these filters. I actually spent some time with the head of skincare for all of Sephora. She was over all of skincare for Houston. And when I explained to her what I did, she said to me, like, I want to sue TikTok. And so I used Dr. Collier's words and I said, tell me more. And she said that they have seen this unprecedented amount of young girls who are going into Sephora who are seeing, these drunk elephant products on TikTok and Instagram, and are being made to believe that they have to have these products in order to, be accepted in their friendship group. But drunk elephant products contain such high concentrates of retinol, like anti-aging chemicals, that are really only for women over the age of 30, but they are having these like 9, 10, 11-year-old girls going and buying these products. And so she said they have had just so many young girls going in with chemical burns on their skin. And she told me that there was one girl who had such horrific chemical burns that she had permanent skin pigmentation damage that will never, ever resolve. And so she was seeing kind of the product of all of this mass marketing of these products. They just have so much power, and you can just see how vulnerable these children are when parents aren't having these preventative conversations. And that's what we want to do. We want to be preventative. We don't want to be reactive. We don't want to be having to scramble to find speakers or find content because something's happened at school. We want to be preventative and this kind of tangible solution to this. Children are just so vulnerable, and it just is so, so sad at the kind of content that they're being exposed to from such a young age. Snapchat, Snapchat have taken this gambling concept of a streak, and they have just put it straight in their app very successfully. And we have had conversations with children who have, paid a friend to keep their Snap streak going when, the parents have taken the phone away. Dean, one of my colleagues, he works for Smart Families, and he was a youth minister before he came on his role with us. And he reported that, a child dropped out of confirmation class because it meant going to like preparation classes when they were not allowed their phone. So that child chose to not go through confirmation just because they weren't able to have access to Snapchat. Something that's been on my radar recently is if anyone's familiar with Duolingo, my daughter's been doing Duolingo, and they've brought the streak in, which is, I'm a little bit frustrated because I have to challenge my daughter sometimes and say to her, why are you doing this? Why aren't you on this app today? Is it, because you want to learn this Spanish, or is it because Duolingo is telling you that you're going to lose your streak? And, this is from young ages that this is happening. So this is a little bit of a sneak peek for App Trap. I go in and say these things to the students, and they all go, oh, like, how do you know these things? Because I say things that are just so part of their world. And I just say, this is the science, this is not accidental. This is so intentional. Like Ramsey Brown said, they're designing minds. When you do some research, and all of this is very public knowledge, you can go and Google any of these things and you'll see people are starting to talk about these now. And these platforms have not been held accountable for a lot of the things that happen on there. I am so hopeful because last week, something called COSA, or 2 weeks ago, COSA, the Child Online Safety Act, this was passed through Senate, the first legislation of anything to do with kind of online safeguarding for about 2 decades. And so hopefully these platforms will have to implement changes so that children, are not part of this totally unregulated social experiment. We know that most children don't receive any training when they're given a smartphone. They are not kind of given any training around social media. They just kind of stumble their way through it and do what everybody else is doing. And the product that we all end up with is this, which may be a very familiar scene that many of you have seen around. You don't have to go far to see people just staring at a screen. There have been so many trade-offs because of this social experiment. Social skills, if something happens that a child doesn't like in a friendship group, you know, they do not have to even have any, you know, practice conflict resolution. I am just going to block them and not deal with them and just pretend that, you know, I don't have to deal with this. Children aren't learning how to have conversations where they have different opinions about things. So, you know, so many trade-offs. An interesting point I just want to make here that was really interesting for me with my own classroom was I would notice with my little itty bitties that they would just randomly fall off chairs. I mean, it was a thing. I'd hear a crash and I'd turn around and there'd be a child on the floor and I'd say, okay. And they'd be like, yeah. And they'd get back up and sit on the chair. And it was happening a lot. So I started asking teacher friends, are anybody else's children falling off the chairs? Mine are falling off the chairs. And then when I started Googling and researching it, I actually discovered a lot of teachers were talking about children falling off chairs. And then I came across this really great research presentation from somebody who was studying a part of the brain that's responsible for the vestibular system. And this is a lesser known sensory part of the brain. And so the vestibular system is to do with balance. And the way that you develop your vestibular system is from doing things, big movements like twirling, rolling, swinging, okay? And then look at the screen, and this is what you see even younger and younger children. And there's this growing body of research to show now that an underdeveloped vestibular system is causing like a sensory deficit. And it's affecting things like depth perception. These children, you know, can't place themselves concretely in the world because of this vestibular system that's underdeveloped. Now, what does this look like in a classroom? It looks like this. Falling off chairs, that was obviously my thing. Fidgety, you know, can't sit still. Poor handwriting, poor focus, inability to write, copy off the board onto a piece of paper. And what I discovered were that lots of these kind of symptoms and these behaviors that got demonstrated looked increasingly like what you would typically expect in, say, ADHD in the classroom. And it was just so fascinating. And this is recent, this research has come out. And so people are now starting to discover that there's a huge body of students who have got this sensory deficit, this, you know, underdeveloped vestibular system. And these children are growing up and going through education, you know, without even parts of their brains being fully developed. They're really fascinating. And I'll give you my email if anybody wants to see this presentation. I've been offering to share it with teachers that you can see because it's just so interesting and explained my whole falling off chair theory. So here is, you know, a typical scene that we see. Some mental health statistics. We were very grateful, as I say, to Jonathan Haidt, who brought all this very mainstream. Just some statistics that are really concerning are around, you know, self-harm, particularly around girls. Again, you know, algorithms, social media pushing this concept that, you know, you're not as good as anybody else, you don't look like that, you know, you're supposed to look like this whole illusion of, you know, again, Snapchat dysmorphia, and it's really been affecting girls. Also things like anxiety increases, depression. So there's been a lot of talk specifically around mental health. Also things like loneliness at school. Hyperconnectivity can really mask loneliness. And even though children can have these like insane numbers of, you know, followers or Snap, like connections on Snap, they actually report that they are incredibly lonely. And one of the reasons that we believe this to be is that children are being shaped to understand what a friend is from what they are absorbing through things like social media and YouTube. And children aren't developing these really authentic relationships that, you know, are so, I mean, we're born to be relational with other human beings. And it's hard to identify these children, especially when children have been on smartphones within school. Like before, you'd be able to identify the child who had, you know, was sitting by themselves, but now children will just stare at a screen, and it's increasingly more difficult for, you know, staff to be like, oh, I think they're feeling lonely. So this is kind of some statistics on that. Also, the academic impact. This is internationally across the board. You know, what is happening is that because of this interaction with focus and attention, especially things like TikTok brain is a thing now. From constantly watching these like this dopamine drip of short videos and, you know, really short video content, children are not able to neurologically, you know, have the focus and attention that they used to have. If you're trying to teach a very complex math concept, but a child is going home and spending 4 or 5 hours, you know, watching video after video. And remember, they don't even have to touch the screen for a new video anymore. Autoplay means this will just keep playing and playing and playing. That they are losing this ability for directed attention or sustained attention. You know, this is why, you know, their brains are so used to this high dopamine activity that these low dopamine activities, such as reading a book, you know, working through a study book, you know, having to deal with comprehension, it's increasingly more difficult for these children to be able to do this. And just, you know, internationally, what we're seeing is this decline in academic scores. So interestingly, we also have some connections with Houston Neuroscience Brain Center, and they see a lot of students who, these are these kind of on the borderline of kind of problematic gaming. And these students go away to college and totally fail the first semester. And it's because whilst they've been at high school, you know, they have been, you know, had parents who were kind of, you know, helping them with these executive function skills, but often, you know, doing things and helping them, doing them for them. And then when they go to college and then they have all this free time and they've got to manage their own schedule, these students will go and binge on the thing that, you know, they have been conditioned to chase. So whether it's gaming or social media. And so Dr. Ron at Houston Neuroscience Brain Center, they see these students who come back from college and help give them some kind of treatment plan to detox their brains and teach them the skills that so they can go be successful at college. So some academic impact. So after all that doom and gloom on a Monday evening, potentially the night before school, I apologize, that was heavy, but here is what Smart Families are proposing that we can do at your school. We want to take all of that content and information that you've just heard, and we want to turn it into good. And so, like I said, we are this very tangible solution that parents can invest in to be able to offset all of what they've learned about dopamine and all they've learned about apps and, you know, the way that their children's brains are so susceptible to some of these things. And we want to do a master reset and just make it so that parents and children have got this beautiful connection which they are striving for. So a little recap, these are our community norms. Everything that we do has a strong focus on these 4. So what we do is we do these 3 things. We educate. We have a lot of education that filters through our school community. With the education, then we empower these parents to take what they know, you know, share it with their other friends, you know, create these strong communities, and then we support them in any way we possibly can. So on your campus, through our education, we have presentations, parent presentations, student presentations, and we can tailor these presentations. So we would really encourage you, if, you know, throughout the school year, you recognize, you know, maybe you're a 6th grade teacher, you are having an issue with boys and Discord and, you know, Fortnite, you know, things are happening off campus, you know, kids are trash talking, saying things to each other under this whole illusion of anonymity. And then lo and behold, the next day, all of this filters into the school day, you know, and parents can come along and say, and what are you going to do about this? So you might be recognizing this trend. So what we can do at Smart Families is we can actually tailor our content and put together some kind of content to educate even just smaller groups of parents. So we have done a small webinar just for like 7th grade parents who wanted to know more about Fortnite and brain development. Dr. Collier was able to host that. So we would always encourage you, if you are seeing this, like share it with your school counselor, share it with admin, you know, and then get that information back to us and we can see how we can work with you. Newsletters, we're going to be sharing 2 newsletters a month. One is going to be, if you're part of our faith-based school community, you are going to get science-based newsletter, and you are also going to get faith-based content. The faith-based content is a really beautiful just address to everything in the science. So this is going to have kind of scripture references, devotionals, and things that parents can integrate into, you know, their conversations with children, to really focus that and bring the two kind of intersections together. If you are part of our non-faith-based school community, you will get the science ones once a month that will come through. We have webinars, so we host regular monthly webinars. So October will be our first one. We're going to focus on gaming. And then we also have speakers. We are partnered with a number of different organizations. If you know of speakers who have been on your radar and you think would be great, we are so blessed with our program that we're able to fund, a lot of what we do with schools. In fact, like the majority of what we do with schools, if not all we do with schools. So we're able to provide that for schools too. So, please share any resources that you have too. So we educate. These are the 4 key events that you're going to see on campus coming up. So we kick off with Dr. Collier. She does her neuroscience kind of primer. She is incredible, and you will soon be finding out what the dates are for your campus. And I would really encourage you to attend this talk. So kind of the neuroscience that I've just done, you'll get a much more in-depth kind of deep dive into the neuroscience. And it really is so fascinating. And like I say, she came to my in-service training, and she was just the person who answered so many of my questions of what I was seeing in my own students. And then we have the AppTrap. This is a presentation that I come into school and I talk is developmentally appropriate for different age groups. And we talk about, these are the apps that you use. We even talk about YouTube and how that also has a lot of embedded, very coercive strategies in there to make compulsive users. And then we have the Family Code Workshop. This is going to be held at your school, and we invite parents and their families all to come on campus, and they join us, and we provide dinner, and we spend the first part, kind of chatting with each other, getting to know each other. And then what we do then is create a family code. And this is where we talk about family values. And this is so important for families to kind of address. And research tells us that 7 out of 10 parents will speak about family values with their children, but often it's not very explicit to the child. So maybe there's a value embedded in, a statement that they're making if they're correcting a behavior. But only 3 out of 10 people ever write these values down. And values, the research tells us, are this really powerful tool that can be a little bit of a buffer if a child is in a position where they maybe are seeing peer pressure or feeling peer pressure, or they want to try something that might be a risky behavior. And so when a child is firm and they know their family values, it can offset some of that desire to engage in something that's high risk behavior. It kind of gives them a pause and they say, hang on a sec, this is against my family values. And so we talk about that with the parents, and we provide them with a big sheet with all the values on that, because sometimes parents can say, I don't really know what value is. And if parents haven't had parents who've had these conversations with them, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, the parents, to have it with their children. So we help them and we guide them. And then they create this template about, what are the risky behaviors we say no to. Now, I have been through this with my children, but my eldest, who was then 11 at the time, it was during this family code workshop that he turned around to me and said, we say no to self-harm. And I was like, okay, because I had no idea he knew what self-harm was. And this happens time and time again at this event, because it's this very safe space where children know that they can offer up this information, and parents will listen and receive it. And then you get the opportunity to speak directly to whatever they've said and help them reframe it, or explore more about it. Again, we hear lots of parents who are saying, oh my God, my child has just said this and I didn't even know they knew that. So I think it's possibly my favourite event that we do. It's so, so lovely. And then we have another student event. Now, for faith-based schools, they will explore kind of follow me, what does God say about technology and your value? But we also offer this for our non-faith-based schools from a secular perspective, and this will just be about followers, where do we derive our value from, and looking at how to, maintain this authenticity in this, whole sea of likes that we kind of get immersed in. So there are 4 events, and you can look out for those on campus. So Empower, again, this is all parent-led. And so we work with your parent lead and hopefully a group of parents, and we find opportunities to create events where parents can get together and just mentor each other and share and tell people what they think. Here's what it can look like on campus. We have had parents say, we want to go out for fajitas and margaritas. And so Smart Families can make that happen and find a venue. And, we can send out invites for parents to go. We could even have, if a group of third grade parents said, we want to go to Top Golf, like no devices, like everybody has to be present, nobody can use this technology, we want to just engage and lean into each other, that's another thing that we can do. So we are very open to creating these experiences that are going to find and group these parents together, and we love coming up with new resourceful ways. I had somebody share with me, it would be really great to have at father-daughter dance, Smart Families can provide maybe a photo booth so that, people aren't on their phones and saying that they have to have them for taking pictures. We can have like a Smart Family space where phones go, and then dads, will spend very intentional time and not without any distractions. So those kinds of things are what we can create. And then finally, just support. We receive very little resistance from what we're doing. Everybody, if anything, kind of breathes this huge sigh of relief that there now is, an organization on campus who are just helping, affirm people who know that this has been, just this, again, unregulated social experiment, and really support parents in, not feeling like they're swimming against the current, or they're against, sorry, bless me. Unfortunately, I only did 2 sneezes. I normally have lots of sneezes. So support in any way that we can. So I'm very near the end. Here is my teacher wish list. And these are, I'm not going to say here's a concrete list of things I need you all to go away and do, because I'm very mindful of workloads. However, this is my wish list. Share our content. Now, this could be as simple as just talking about us. If you have a parent-teacher conference and a parent comes to you and they say, I'm really struggling with, there are, a fortnight, or this is happening, and it's anything technology related, or anything to do with what you recognise within our family norms, please just refer them our way. Remind them we are a Smart Family school. We are committed to these norms, and we are rolling this at our school. Point them in the direction of our website. We can share with you who is the lead parent on campus. You can direct them towards the lead parent. We are just want to be so accessible. So kind of share our content. Even, I'm going to give you the option to sign up to our newsletters on a QR code at the end of the presentation. That will help you to just see the kind of content that we're distributing each month. Sometimes it's gaming, sometimes it's social media, sometimes talking about peer pressure. We're also going to be talking about risky play and why children need to have these experiences so we don't create, like fragile children. So you may see a webinar is coming up, and in your class you recognise that, peer pressure is something that you've seen and you've witnessed. You can just put something in your weekly newsletter to parents and remind, we are, Smart Families are hosting a webinar this coming Monday. Here's the RSVP to sign on. So anything like that for sharing our content. Also attend our events. You are more than welcome to attend any of these events on campus. They are for parents and students. However, we extend the invite for anybody to come and join us. We provide food at things like the family dinner, the family code workshop. So if you just want to come and join us for dinner and sit and kind of have some conversation time outside of the classroom, with us or with the families, you are more than welcome to come. So again, where your schedule permits, you are welcome. And then refer interested parents. You may have heard me speak tonight and be thinking, I know exactly the kind of parents in my school who would love to get involved with this. Maybe that you've heard them, they're already delaying smartphones, or they've already been talking about social media. Please reach out to us, because we would love to connect with those parents. What often starts as this small group can rapidly expand, and that's when we get the most change in the school community. So you can either reach out to admin and say you've done the Smart Families training, you know a family who you think would be really interested. You know, you may also be a parent at your school and you might be interested. So again, reach out and we can get connected. We do training for lead parents where they come and walk through what the program is, and there is very minimal workload. We do everything on the back end. You know, we create all the flyers, we create help doing all the scheduling. We just want interested parents. So they're my 3 wish lists. And finally, how can I support you? I have time within my schedule that if there is something you want to know more about, you know, a particular topic, or maybe I already have a presentation created that you could use if you want some research or statistics, please reach out to us. We just love to hear and support our teachers. You are just this amazing, you know, guide for these students and this vessel of information between so many parts of the school community, and we really truly value the work that you're doing at your school. Okay, this is our Smart Families newsletter. So if anybody wants to scan this QR code, and this is also on our website, so if for any reason you don't scan it now, if you don't have a phone, you can go onto our website, which is www.smart-families.org, and sign up for our newsletter. Again, just be kind of nice to be in the loop and see what it is that we're doing on campus. We are continually doing new things. We love to involve. You know, we did a teacher focus last, I think it was February this year.